So here we are at the Battle of Cabala. This is a little later than the last one. Gela was in 405. This one's down in 377. Dionysus has had a lot of time. Now, historically he won Gela. He won it in... Right? No. He lost Gela. But he did manage to get a treaty with Carthage, and that gave him a lot of freedom to play around in Italy and establish his power base. And then he decides to go back and try to conquer the areas of Sicily that aren't under Syracuse's control. And I'm pausing so much because I'm trying to keep the pipe lit for whatever reason. I'll just put it out of my mouth. And that is the cause of some of my ums. So, this is the Second Punic War. Right? No, this is the Third Punic War for Syracuse and Carthage. The Second Punic War we just gloss over. Basically, there was a siege of Motoya. There was a naval victory by Carthage, which is actually covered in War Galley, and we'll get to that at some point. This is the Battle of Catana, and then Himilco goes on and besieges Syracuse, and during that siege a plague hits. The Carthaginian army is just ravaged. Dionysus comes out, destroys the Carthaginian army. The king negotiates a free escape and abandons his troops, or at least some of his troops. The mercenaries, the Libyans. And that causes the fall of the kingdom. And now here we have the first of the Cephets, Mago, first? I don't know. An early Cephet. Coming back to avenge, coming back to defend Dionysus' attempt to attack Carthage again. And we've got a mixed force here, which is the Carthaginians have a much weaker army than they normally do. But there's one thing you'll notice. Oh, look, there's green and purple on both sides. Yeah, the countermix isn't really supporting this battle as well as it does some of the others. In particular, Syracuse has got some Celtic allies here, whereas the Iberians are over on the Carthaginian side. The other thing, maybe there's a Greek mercenary peltists that are available in some other color, but I couldn't find any. And I looked at everything except red. Now, maybe there's one in some other set, but that I haven't pulled out yet or whatever. But that, I don't know. This is going to be really, really hard to cope with. The greens, maybe not so much because I can recognize them, but those guys, they may end up turning coat midway through the battle, and that wouldn't be too bad. They're mercenaries, right? Okay. But the quality is the real question. So we've got our normal tribal horde, which, you know, it ain't great, but it tends to hold up. We got the Iberians, they're pretty good. Skirmishers, you can just discount. A couple of hoplite units that aren't anything to write home about. But then we've got all of the Persian levy units. Now, this is kind of strange. It would be kind of cool if they just called them Persian levy, you know. But instead, they specify by type. So you have the Babylonians, you have the Anatolians, you have the Asians. They're all exactly the same. They're just light skirmisher troops with javelins and really crappy morale that you really don't want getting in the fight because they're just going to cost you route points. Over on the Syracuse side, you have a stronger army, I think, than usual. First of all, you have these Celts, including Lancers, which definitely stiffens, it's some additional medium infantry, or some medium infantry, which gives me a little bit more flexibility than the usual hoplite units do. The front line is mostly pretty high quality stuff. There's one 6-point unit here. There's 7-point unit to anchor over here in terms of the hoplites. So we've got some stronger hoplites, and in general they're 6s and 7s instead of 5s and 6s. Although there is a reserve line back here of 5s and 6s with some peltists in the back. But you hope you're not going to need them, or if you do, they're just kind of a mop-up, or, well, hopefully not a patching. Cav-wise, Carthage has mixed cav, lights and heavies in here. That got me in trouble last time. And then again over here. Whereas, the same kind of balanced forces, although we do have the Lancer over here. I'm going to try to use my chariots better now that I know that they are actually more potent than I thought they would be in this era. They're supposedly already obsolete, but man, we saw them do some potential damage. The problem with them is they got to make that tactical quality check if they hit, and they've got the shit tactical quality. The ones from Chariots of Fire have high tactical quality, so they get to use their cool table. These guys, well, if they pass their check, they get it. On the bright side, they only cost two route points to lose, so they're not that big a deal if I do lose them. It's not like I can form a big chariot line and sweep by somebody and kill them with arrows either. There just aren't enough of them, and to take that kind of tactics into effect. I'm not sure what's wrong with me, but I'm having real trouble reaching for words recently. I'm trouble getting started today, but here we are at what is it, Cabala. We have Dionysus here, and he's an elite leader, so I have the option to trigger something. Normally that's kind of a neat option. I don't really want to do it here. I'm going to leave it up to chance because the 3-point leaders, there's one here and one back here. Well, the 3-point leader for Carthage is more annoying for them to move than anything else. And I would rather give this some play, see what happens. Initial reticence by Dionysus has caused something that happens whenever I'm playing and someone decides, oh, I'm going to be kind of cautious. I'm like, wow, maybe that's not a bad idea. So actually the Carthaginians are moving ahead kind of cautiously as well, putting themselves in a position where they can't just be attacked by anything right away. There was a lot of space in between the armies in this scenario for whatever reason. It's not like there's a lot of room to maneuver here. So, the first turn is kind of going to be a waste because nobody wants to move forward fully. There's also a problem with the Carthaginian line. For example, all these lights. The ordering of the leaders is such that the best leaders are going late in the turn, obviously. Well, they're in command of the units that are kind of blocking the way for some of the others. So we're not seeing everything move forward quite as rapidly as perhaps it should. And after the danger of a possible attack from the cav here, trumping in, which succeeded, has even slowed down the advance in a more rigorous fashion, I guess, where the remaining units, because this is Dionysus who trumped in, well, he failed to get his momentum after he moved the skirmishers up, and he couldn't do a line command, so he had to do individual commands on them. The reason he couldn't do a line was one of them was stuck here. Well, then he decided to fail his momentum check, and that left him without the ability to move his main center forward, which I really wanted to get forward. And well, you can see the other hoplites have moved forward. Over here things are kind of jagged with the heavies moving forward on their left flank into position. And otherwise, we're done with the first turn. Very little has happened. Like I said, there was a lot of space to cover there. The distance, there's an interesting situation here, which I'm not used to facing, the initial distance and the delaying tactics, which is that now I have to roll for line commands in order to engage, which is something I haven't had to do in most scenarios because they started out close enough that they would slam into each other. And that's not the case right now. Or hand one out as an elite order. But there aren't a lot of elite orders I want to give. In fact, the number seems to be 0. I could give one to myself and push forward, but I'm not really sure I see too much advantage to that. Well, I think I'll do that. Simply, I got to move full speed with the hoplites, but because then I can use Dionysus to try to move some of the other commands with line commands. He doesn't have to roll for them. To roll for the line commands is really hard on me, and I didn't do it. I cheated here. We had these guys moving forward, and then the skirmishers made an attack. First blood's drawn, chariots, and skirmishers. Let's take a look. So the first roll would not have succeeded, and the second one wouldn't have even been available to be made. But it wouldn't have either, because he does not have very good line command capability. He only has a 1. He's not the overall commander. He was not in range of the overall commander to be able to do that. So, life goes on, right? We got, let's see what forces have gone. Some of the cav up here have pushed forward a little bit. And like we saw, the skirmisher attacks. The Carthaginians moving their hordes forward, which, again, they couldn't have actually done to the degree that they did. More action over in the skirmishers. A couple more chariots bit the dust, and then there was also some trading of shots here. This guy has no missiles left, so he's getting shot up by those skirmishers. Line moved forward. Cav within striking distance now, but they didn't get the momentum, so they couldn't hit. And likewise, over here we've got the light infantry, the Iberian infantry, pushing up close behind so that they could be a follow-up to whatever the Cav battle is going to be. One of the nice things for the Carthaginians, they have a force that just covers the entire field. Now, Syracuse could too, but then it would be this stupid light, the very thin line of hoplites. And we've seen those crumble a little too easily. You need something to throw in the second line, and that's why it's kind of cool there's a reserve line here. I don't think the other battles have had much in the way of that. Although the last one, Gela or whatever, had forces coming from the city that sort of served in that purpose, but well, it didn't work out. But yeah, this one's developing a lot more slowly than most of them do because it started at a distance, and that leaves room for that kind of game of chicken that happens in GBOH games. Maybe I'm just in the mood for the game of chicken, I don't know. Down to the bottom of the activations, which is Dionysus, and I think that's all that's left because we had an unsuccessful attempt to trump a momentum over here. The Carthaginian Cav, which is better than the Syracusan Cav, shifts, so the heavy cav in their formation got their advantage against the lancers and the lights, and the light cav came in and slammed into the heavies, routing one of them and catching this mercenary guard stuff. Oh, yeah, Zoom's not working well. Anyway, that was fairly successful. I had to use my leader, though, and got into personal combat, killing the Syracusan leader, which was part of my hope. I had a better melee value with this 4 here. And a good leader overall with a 3-point swing for the combat itself from the charisma. Unfortunately, that means this is probably not going to be changing much for a little while. I'll be able to trigger combat, but not a lot of maneuvering. So Hyro here is charging forward, scared away this chariot a little bit. It only took one cohesion hit. It automatically takes one. It might take another, with the intention of trying to break through the crap in the line. And I feel like the Carthaginian cav here pushing the issue is going to make it all the more important that I hit. Now here, one of the reasons is, hey, my flank is not exposed to the cav, so I can push forward. Of course, it is exposed to the light infantry, and that's going to be a possible problem. Not sure what I'm doing with Dionysus yet. He doesn't have a lot of units that he has to move. He can push this one forward. Beyond that, I don't know, because I have these stupid skirmishers I got to clear out of the way. Well, what I'd like to do with them is try to clear some of the Carthaginian skirmishers and chariots and such not out of the way with them. We'll see how well that works. With all the slow movement and everything that's taking place in this scenario, man, that's a lot of counter flipping back and forth. Over here you can see some of the missile low units not recovering here because they're, I mean, this one's in an archer, but they're adjacent to each other. I fired my last shot and didn't get what I needed. So likewise here, these archers are keeping me from reloading. Over here, the chariot is keeping it. I'm trying to pull skirmishers out of the line, but it's tough to do. And then I've got these peltists who are running up to join the line and creating even more of a traffic jam. But I do really want to try to punch into that garbage there because I expect that's a lot of points. The 5s aren't too bad. We've seen them holding up, although they do have, what is this, the tribal roll, if I can remember it, which is, they're not as good at missile fire against heavy infantry hoplites, and they can't do orderly withdrawal very well. Well, that's fine. They're planning on trying to stand, but these might not even stand. So these guys, if you roll a tactical quality check on them, and the worst that happens is they take 4 hits from it. And that means they're going to defend. These guys, a roll of 6 or higher, which is what, 40%? 6, 7, 8, 9, yeah, 40% of the time, they just break as soon as you come towards them. Now, they get to throw their javelins, but that's it, you know? And they're not much better than skirmishers, and unlike skirmishers, they're not worth a point each. They're worth 3 points each, which means they can eat up these the route points pretty quickly. Now the route points are pretty big in this one, 120, 125, but our totals right now 6 for Carthage, 16 for Syria. Of course, Syria has a big cav unit that's running off the map, and I don't know if I'm going to get a chance to save it, given that their leader is gone and I've got other things to do. So this is actually a pretty big points too. It's a, well, it's only a 6. It's not that big. This is the big one. And it begins. I have to think a little bit whether I want to commit these. So I decided not, basically I did a line activation. I was within range of my overall commander, had this doinky little guy to start things off, and just sent the entire light force, the irregulars, into play. Well, the reason for that is because they're better attacking than they are defending. They aren't great at anything, but they also have the advantage, which the hoplites don't, of being able to run around the scattered skirmisher line. This is a big difference. It's, you know, why the Romans can get away with their velites and the Carthaginian line in SPQR couldn't handle having skirmishers in front. The skirmishers cause you a big problem when you have these phalanxes. But when you have a more flexible formation, you can sort of swarm through the gaps in the skirmishers largely. They do cause a little bit of problems every now and then, depending on the hex grain and stupid stuff like that. Anyway, the line up to here, and that's pretty much where the commander is, has advanced. And you can see we even got a little attack here. We got some trying to brush away the skirmishers, which isn't the best thing because now the hoplites can hit. But, you know, once the skirmishers are gone. But whatever, you know. Doing a partial attack and leaving one side open for the skirmishers to run back and start hacking the rear of didn't sound good either. But now over here, the question is, I decided not to move this line forward because it can't quite strike. And I want to let the hoplites move forward and get first strike again. There's almost always an advantage to being the attacker, to having the momentum on your side in this system. I'm sure that there might be, you know, ways of handling something like the Saxon shield wall. I actually remember there being shield wall type rules, which take a lot of that away. But the idea is, all other things being equal, if you've got the momentum behind you, you're more likely to break through the enemy than anything else. But I might want to move this part of what was this line. So I basically have a choice. I can't move this and this, but the reason I might want to move these is to create a more solid front and slow down any advance here in the center. I'm not sure. And that hit largely cleared out our skirmishers here. We did manage to rout one of the hoplites. That's pretty big. One of the medium infantry over here. But otherwise, mainly, we're just cleaning up skirmishers. Brought the point total up to 19. It's hard to tell whether that was a success. Oh, I gotta check for this guy. Whether that was a successful attack or not. I think it's a no missile as well. I'm kind of running low on no missiles now. Obviously, I have other GBOH games, but I don't like the idea of mixing the counters for some unknown reason. I'm not sure that there's any good rationale behind that because I'm not going to sell any of these. So I wouldn't bag all my counters together, but it might make sense to steal counters from another game. Unfortunately, what I end up doing is stealing them from the original Alexander because they look different. And that makes me feel like, you know, I can easily sort them out. But if I use the counters from the more modern games, then they all kind of look the same, and there's no way of making sure I have the right pieces in the right game. Again, I'm never going to sell them, but there's something in me that says, oh, I can't do that. And I'm not sure what it is. It's not like I didn't do it with SFB, and, well, that's all one system that, you know. But I'm sure there are other games where I combined all the pieces. I just don't view these as expansions. Like, I combine the pieces from the expansion. I just don't combine the separate boxed games in the same way. So that's going to put us, let's see, just did a 3 over here to whoever the 3 is over here. Maybe he's dead. He's dead. All right. Well, we only have 1 3 on each side, so it's going to put us on one of the 4s. I don't know which one. I could even use this guy again. I'm not sure precisely what I want to do. The first strike by these guys is going to be impressive, I think. But I'd kind of like to wait until... No, I can't. I was going to say, I'd kind of like to wait until some of the routed units clear out of there. But honestly, I just can't. The only thing I could do is try to rally some of them. But this guy's got to go before Dionysus, who's the guy I'd want to rally units with. And also rallying them doesn't clear them out of my way either. So it kind of gives me a mess. Cusian Cav charges forward, slams into this stuff. Now they ran into a problem. I moved the leader too early. He got hit with a javelin, wounded, and that meant I didn't activate this in time. It's just one of those little ordering things you have to get right, and well, I could also move that, I guess. Such is life. The disadvantage to that, of course, is I've left this one free. I also didn't come out terribly well in that initial charge, which should have been better, just because I had the charge formation and there were a couple of light cav here. This was in charge formation, but the leader penalizes further, so that didn't work out terribly well. And then over here in the center, this guy rallied. extra moved to create a line. I don't know how much use this does. You know, in a sense, having a ragged line of this crap is kind of nice because the hoplites kind of break against it and end up in a jagged line themselves, which they're less capable of coping with. So spending tactical quality to move into position here probably wasn't that great an idea, but moving some of the skirmishers up was, and took a shot at this thing, ended up killing one of these with an attack from the light infantry, just, you know, scoring some more hits. It just routed units getting cleaned up. And now I think there's one 4-pointer left over on this side, so it's going to have to be this command here. I am not in range of him, so if I want to do a line command, it's going to have to be on initiative, but I can't even do that. I'm locked in combat here, so it doesn't look like I'm doing much. I'm just going to be fighting those things. This time Syracuse has a much better force and better leadership and everything, but it looks like Carthage is going to win again. In this case, Cav, another leader, got caught in zones, unit got destroyed, unable to retreat, blah blah blah, bad things happened, and all the points that are getting racked up against Syria are coming from the leaders. So we've lost 735 points out of our 51 casualty points from leaders. Otherwise this would be a pretty close battle, and we're actually just caving in the front ranks of those light infantry. They're just collapsing under the pressure from the decent hoplites. But as sometimes happens in this game, some unlucky situations or maybe a little bit of poor placement ends up putting you in a location where you get kind of screwed. And in this case, the Syracusan Cav actually won a battle, had to advance, and ended up stuck in a stupid position where it got routed and couldn't get out of, and the leader went with it. Over here, let's see what's going on here. This guy took one activation to do a line command. He was within range of Dionysus. He only had one possible momentum coming anyway, so doing the line command seemed like a good idea. And we smacked aside some of the light stuff, but, you know, killing some skirmishers and light infantry doesn't do much point-wise. There's a lot of routed units here, but they're not hoplite units. They don't just dissolve, so, you know, I mean, at the end of the turn or whatever. So they've got a significant amount of time on the map that they can be recovered, and that big, you know, nearly 40-point lead might be the deal here. And this isn't decided, but you start stripping away leadership as well as racking up the points for dead leaders, and it's going to be pretty hard, I think, for Syracuse to come back here. Series of actions by Himmelko here, who is not the commander-in-chief, even though he has 3 stars. He's just, you know, it's the reuse of the counters. So they assign him 5 line rating if he needs it. He ran around, tried to rally some units. So-so effect. You can see, point-wise, we gained a lot of points. One of them was finding a unit that shouldn't have been there at all. It was a skirmisher that I had marked routed. But we also launched some attacks on some of these hoplite units using, like in this case, a flank attack, and got some good effects off that. So you see there's a couple of routed hoplites now that weren't there before. A couple more here. That looks pretty bad for Syracuse. They're going to be getting pretty close to 100, but remember, 125 is our number here, but they're in much worse shape than just the sheer numbers seem to say. I think our next leader is this Cav guy over here who, I don't know what he's up to, but he'll be able to trigger some attacks. He can't really do anything of value except for launch attacks because he's stuck in a, actually he's not in a zone, so he's able to send a command out and do some stuff, and he might be able to get some outflanks there, it looks like. Isis did what he could, running back and forth, pushing units forward. We had this attack just punched through in a hole, some of these mediums crushing through, rallying units, failing to rally some units. But when the price came to pay for all these hoplite formations, came out exactly to 125. That's battle over. The Syracuse army failed. And, you know, we didn't do much to the Carthaginian. Now, take away the 35 points, and it's still not a close running score. Because, again, maybe because I was taking more chances to some extent, but, again, these damn hoplite formations are just too stiff. If we look at the units that died, yeah, there's a 7. That's a pretty unlucky. That's hard to kill. But the others, it's the 6s that died, you know. The 5, the couple of 5s, I tried to keep them out of fighting because they're just really points asking to be taken. It's not that they're all that weak, it's just they're not super powerful. They can't resist, you know, they can't shrug off the hits the way the 7 or an 8 can. But yeah, it's pretty tough. And we'll send this one up, Cabala.